We're going to start this puppy up. Clear, prop.
And welcome back to Tip of the Week, Building the Affordaplane. In this part, we're going to start on the landing gear, a very important part with plenty of interesting assembly challenges ahead. So let's get started.
Real quickly, before we get started, I want to let you know that I read all of the comments on these videos. I don't have time to answer them all, but I do see a few questions that crop up over and over again from time to time. So I thought I'd take a brief moment to answer one of them. The one question this week will be, what engine are we going to use on this Affordaplane project? Now, for me to answer that, I want to ask you a question, and that will help us arrive at the correct answer to this. My question to you is, how heavy is the engine that we can use on this Affordaplane? What is the weight limit? How heavy can it be? We know engines range from light to very heavy, and is there a limit? What is the weight limit? So see if you can answer that correctly, and we'll get back with the answer towards the end of this segment.
Here are the materials we'll use in this video. We have a 2-inch square tube, a 1-inch solid bar, some 2-inch angle, and some stainless steel brackets.
Our first step will be to create a couple of brackets. Now, these are made from our 2x2 angle stock, 1/8 inch thick of our 6061 T6, and we are to cut out a pair of 2-inch brackets. Now, this is 2-inch by 2-inch by 2-inch by 2-inch. It's all 2-inch, and basically that's the amount that you're going to cut off here, but it's also 2 by 2-inch. Then the next step will be to mark our locations that we're going to be drilling holes. Now, these are in the plans. Basically, there will be 2 bolt locations on this flange, and then 2 locations on the other flange. And notice that it actually goes like this. The 2 going across are going to be attached to our fuselage tube, and the 2 perpendicular are going to be on the landing cross tube. So let's go take a look at where these brackets are going to be located on our structure. The reason we mark the holes is we're going to pre-drill these first before mounting them. And in fact, it is best because these 2 holes are going to be drilled through our fuselage tube all the way to the other side, that we take our second bracket and align it up very nicely, and then clamp it together and drill both of the holes at the same time. That way, that will ensure that as these are on each side of the fuselage tube, the bolts will go through very precisely and meet at the other side. So our first job is to position the bracket at the proper location along the fuselage tube. The plans specify 26 inches from the datum. Well, what is the datum on this aircraft? The datum is a position right here, the forward edge of this tube. And we are to measure 26 inches back, which will bring us back over here. Now, the bracket will be located here, and one will be located on the other side. So we need to pre-drill these 2 holes, and do that with both brackets clamped together, so that when we place them here and one on the other side, the bolts will go through very nicely. I have them clamped together, and I've ensured that they're definitely in line on the bottom and on line on the sides. And I'm not even going to use the drill press because that would be a little bit clumsy, but I have punch these at the locations, and I can drill now all the way through. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch bit, and we'll enlarge it later. I have clecoed it to offer additional protection to keep it nice and steady, and I can go ahead now and drill the second hole. And here's the location and the bracket we just drilled. So I'm going to make sure everything is nice and square and get my location just right. In fact, I will use a surface below to ensure that it's also in the right direction, perpendicular also. Got a cleco, and now we can drill the other side, and you can continue to use the clamp if you so desire. I just up drilled this to 3/16 and we'll use a 3/16 cleco and drill the other hole, up drill the other hole to 3/16. Now we're done for the moment with this. We're going to up drill to the 1/4 inch later when we're all done, but we need to repeat this for the other side using our other bracket. Now, in order to get the other bracket on the other side in precisely the same location, of course we need to transfer this line down to the other side. And we can do that with a small square until we get it to the other side. And then flip this over and perform the exact same function we did on this side, on the other side. And we're on the other side and have drilled both holes up to 3/16, and you know you've done a good job when you can see daylight to the other end. And eventually we'll up drill these to the final 1/4 inch size, but for now we want to remove both brackets, and you can mark them if you think you'll forget which side they go on. And we now need to drill the other flange. So our next step then is to pilot drill with a 1/8 inch bit the 2 holes on this flange, and in fact, so that we can get the other one done at the same time, I'll sandwich these together just like we did before and drill through both of them at the same time. Now this is the landing gear cross tube. It's simply another piece of 2x2 inch, just like our fuselage frame. It is 24 inches long. And what we need to do is mark the center and then mark 1 inch off of the center in both directions. What we're going to do next then is use our square I'm going just a little bit proud of each of my marks. Because what we have then is a position for where our fuselage tube is going to go through. And I'm going to use a scrap piece of 2x2, and that will sit right there. So those lines have marked the center, and I can align it up. Then our brackets, now remember the large holes were for the fuselage tube, and the small holes are going to be for the cross tube. So our goal is to pilot hole our 2 holes in our brackets into the cross tube with them exactly centered. Because when we're done drilling, then of course this will be replaced with our fuselage tube. But that way we can drill it even on a drill press and do that without it being on the fuselage itself. Now this was drilled by hand, and so we need to take this to the drill press because we need to go all the way down to the bottom. The drill press was used with a 3/16 bit. Later we'll drill this up to 1/4 inch. Now my small drill press barely had enough throw to go the full 2 inches, so I actually had to stop and reset the drill bit after drilling past the first hole so that it would make it down to the second. Small inconvenience. We can now take this back up to our fuselage and slide it on the fuselage tube, and we should be able to see the holes line up with our pre-drilled holes in the tube.
Now, remove the cross tube and leave the brackets on the fuselage tube.
We can now drill out the fuselage bracket holes to the full 1/4 inch and put bolts in them. So that's a matter of drilling from this side and the other side, and or all the way through with your 1/4 inch bit. And here we have the 2 brackets bolted in place, and we'll wait later to drill out these when we attach the cross tube, but we have more work on the cross tube first. With our cross tube face up, because this is where we had our brackets, we want to mark 1/2 inch from each edge and centered, and at that point we want to drill a 1/8 inch hole just in the top surface. Now we're going to take our solid 1 inch aluminum bar and cut this to 26.5 inches. Check your plans for that dimension. And we're going to slip it inside of our landing gear cross tube. It's going to go right inside. Now because this is 26.5 and this is 24, we should have about 1 1/4 inches hanging out of both ends. So I got just a little bit here, and at the other end we got a little bit here. So you might say, what are we going to do with this? Well, it turns out our goal is to attach this bar to the very top. Let's see if we can get a better angle of this. We want this center bar to be up against the top edge all along our tube, and the holes we made are going to be bolts, ultimately 1/4 inch bolts that go all the way through. So how the heck are we going to align this round rod to the center of this tube and then drill it? Well, let's take a look at a jig we're going to make thanks to Steve and his jigs that he made that we showed in our last episode. And here is the jig that 3D Steve created for us, as we highlighted in last week's episode. And here are the ones I made from wood that do the same thing. So if you don't have a 3D printer or know someone that does, let's make these out of wood. To help support that bar inside of the cross tube, we're going to create a couple of little jigs. Now here's the one that is 3D printed that Steve made, and here's the equivalent wood jig that we're going to make. And it's very easy. I have a piece of pine board, about 1/2 inch 3/4 thick, and I drew a line. This is going to be 2 inches from top to bottom, 1 3/4 inches across. Then we want to mark a point. This point is 1 1/4 inches up from the bottom and 7/8 inches from either side. That places it in the center between the sides. And at this point, we're going to drill a 1-inch hole. We're going to drill the hole first before we cut it. It's going to be much easier to manage by drilling the hole first, and then we'll make the appropriate cuts. So let's take this over to the drill press. I'm going to use a paddle bit to drill our 1-inch hole. Here's our hole. Now, the next thing we want to do is to draw a line that is tangent to the hole, and then we're going to cut across that line, because remember, we want to end up with something that looks like this, where the top is right at the very top of the circle. So I'm going to draw a line across. Now, when we go up to our bandsaw, we want to cut across here, here, and here, and hopefully end up with something that looks like this. And here's what I got off the bandsaw. I'm going to use my sander so I can open up that gap a little bit more and make it a little bit straighter top there. And here's after the sander. Let's go test fit this inside of a tube. And now that it's sanded, let's see how this fits. And that fits very nice. You can always sand it if it's too tight. That's very nice. And then, of course, we need to make sure that our pipe fits in it. And of course, we'll have one for each end. But this will hold it very nicely in the proper position so that when we drill in the center of the square tube, it will hit the center of the round tube. Then we want to make sure the right amount is protruding from the edge here. And our plans say 1 1/4 inch on each side. So once we got that set just right, we can then drill through our hole that we made previously on our drill press straight down through the rod and all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to continue that hole, that first drill on the drill press, with a 1/8 inch bit. Afterwards, I'm going to cleco that, so that will hold this rod in place, and then proceed to drill the 1/8 hole on the other side all the way down. Then I can increase this to 3/16 and then ultimately to 1/4 inch, but always keeping one end clecoed or bolted, pinned, so that the rod does not move. And of course we want to make sure our wooden jig is not in the line of our drilling, so make sure you push that in far enough. And of course that will end up coming out when we're all done. Ultimately we're going to fill the gap where the jig is located with a bushing or washers, because in the final installation this will be held up tight to the top once the bolts are in place. Now with both ends drilled all the way through with our 1/8 inch drill, we got 4 holes in the middle that we created previously. And of course you can guess what we're going to do with that. We want to use our 3/16 bit on the drill press, and while keeping our ends clecoed, we'll go ahead and drill all the way through on all 4 of these 3/16 holes. And then we'll cleco these, we'll leave them at 3/16, and then we can open up the ends to the full 1/4 inch. Now we're not quite done. Everything's been drilled out to 3/16 along the top. This still has to go to a 1/4 for a bolt, and the end one has to go to a 1/4 for a bolt. But before we do that, we need to place a hole 90 degrees to the other side of this in each end of our solid rod. And if we look at our plans, we see that they want it 3/4 from this edge out, which ends up being a 1/2 inch from the end, which is perfect. So we need to find the exact point and mark it that is 90 degrees from the way we've been drilling so far. And we're going to use our little block, our jig, to find that. So to create this jig, pine board and 1 1/4 in both directions, drew a square, and then corner to corner, and at the center is where we're going to drill our 1 inch hole. And now I'm going to use the bandsaw to cut along the lines. The last step is to drill a hole in the center from left to right, other side, on all 4 sides. The size of this hole can be left up to you. I made it about 1/8, but if you have a favorite pen or punch that needs a particular size hole, feel free, and we can go now put this to use. Probably want to make a few more of these also. I have the unit turned on its side, and so the hole we need is one that will go straight down. And by using our block, we can hit that. Now, the bar is slightly off the table, so I'm going to use some spacers to ensure that it sits nice and flat. And what I'm going to do now is mark with a pen and slide this so I have the very top. And now all I have to do is measure 3/4 from this edge or 1/2 inch from this edge and put a mark. And that needs to have a hole going straight through. I will use the drill press, and of course this will lay flat on the drill press to keep the exact 90 degrees to the hole we want to drill. So in our final stage here, we have 1/4 inch hole drilled all the way through. Same with here. We're going to leave these as 3/16 because these will be final drilled when we attach it back to the fuselage. I'm going to pull this all apart, pull the rod out and deburr everything, reinsert without our jig blocks, pull those out, and then we'll put bolts through here along with some other hardware. And it would be a good idea to mark the top, forward, and rear so that when you put things back, all the holes will line up. Now, to assemble the assembly, we have the square tube. Here's the top here, and then our solid crossbar. We're going to use a bolt, and this would be an AN426, I believe, and then a steel U bracket, and we'll talk about these in a moment and where to get them. Bolt going to go through the U bracket into the tube, into the solid rod, and then to space the solid rod from the tube, we're going to put a stack of washers inside on the bolt, and then when the bolt comes through, another stainless steel U bracket. And I assembled the other side so you can see what it looks like when it's all done. And this is what it looks like. This is the top. We got our stainless steel bracket, and there's the stack of washers. The washers are simply creating a spacer to keep this from coming down, and then another stainless steel bracket. And I just used a castle nut to temporarily hold it. This will be replaced with a nylock nut when we're all done. So we need to build up the other end just like this.
So where did I locate these stainless steel U-brackets? We use them all over the Affordaplane. They're perfect for attaching tubes to other tubes, and they're all pre-drilled and ready to go. I got mine from the Affordaplane store. The prices were excellent because I looked really hard, and I did find them in some other places, and the Affordaplane store was actually cheaper than the one place I found. So I was very happy with their service. I ordered enough for the complete project, so I'm just letting you know that the Affordaplane store has them. It's run by Terry Adair, who is somebody who has finished their Affordaplane and is flying, and you will see a bunch of him on YouTube. So the proof is in the pudding. These are good brackets, and that's where I got mine. He's got a whole bunch of other neat stuff over there on the Affordaplane store. Now let's get back to building here.
Now we can install onto the fuselage, right onto our bracket, and cleco in place. And we can cleco down at the lower bracket. With this in place, we can now go ahead and drill all the way through with our 1/4 inch drill and check our bolt installation. And then we're going to remove this and start working on the rest of the landing gear. But at least this part will now all be completed. With all 4 holes drilled to 1/4 inch, we can now remove those 4 bolts so that we can put the cross member on the table and start building the rest of the landing gear. And that will do in our next part. Now before we go, I owe you an answer to the question, how heavy or what is the weight limit of the engine that we can use on this Affordaplane ultralight? And the answer is We don't know. Remember, we made it very clear from the very beginning that we were building a Part 103 legal ultralight, and the maximum weight for the entire airplane with engine is 254 pounds. Now, is there a weight limit for the engine? And the answer is no. You can use any engine you want as long as the entire aircraft with engine weighs no more than 254 pounds. So let's not evade the issue here. When someone asks, well, what engine are you going to use? How much weight do we have allowed for that engine choice? The answer is, well, how heavy is the rest of the plane? Because the engine weight is simply 254 pounds minus the weight of the airframe without the engine. And maybe with this we can appreciate why we go to such great lengths to keep the aircraft light. Because every pound we can shave off the aircraft means that's another pound we can put towards a more powerful and heavy engine. So the answer to the question is we'll have to wait and see how heavy the aircraft is when we finish. Whatever is left from the 254 pounds, that's going to be the weight limit for the engine. And with that weight limit, then we can go out and shop for engines.
And there you have it. We will continue in our next part and finish up so that we can get this fuselage on the landing gear itself. Everyone, back to building.